Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step realistic progression 1 playthrough. So yeah, we are jumping in, and we have just a lot going on as far as getting new orbital technology, new rocket technology. I've got new tanks. I'm still dealing with the upgrade to 181, which also included an upgrade to my version of RP-1. Which means that there's some extra tanks, extra engines, and things like that I'm still kind of sorting through, but we will go through all of that together. All right, here's the big one. We just finished satellite era material science. Fantastic. So that is going to do a lot for us. We're going to get these part upgrades for integral structure tanks. So now that allows us to use aluminum gridded tanks, which are going to be, so it's basically the equivalent of Tank 3, I think, in terms of performance. But yeah, we're going to have to see what that actually looks like. We can now use balloon tanks, which are crazy. They don't have an internal framework, and they're just pressurized on the inside to keep their shape. So the important example of that was the Atlas, which I love. I love the early Atlas rocket. We're going to be definitely doing something similar to that when I start building this stuff. But yeah, they use balloon tanks because they were, they're no structure, all tank. So I'm not actually sure what these are. So there's, integral structure. So that's not separate structure. So integral structure tanks are also load-bearing and form the entire structure of the tank, so no additional mass is needed to maintain rigidity. So yeah, it's a brand new tank type, or part, that we'll be able to use. So that's something else that we should probably grab so that we can test that. So we have the tank upgrades. I think those go to, so we have... I don't actually see a separate structure tank upgrade here now that I'm looking at it. So we have separate structure tank upgrade, so that's aluminum stringer. But this is integral structure, balloon tank, and balloon tank. Two different types of balloon tank. So yeah, I think we need to buy, not the deprecated one, but the integral structure and the balloon tanks. Yeah, I think I said the same thing about 15 times in a row there, but the important thing to take is that we have new tankage that we will be playing with. All right, so now I'm going back to teaching myself rocket building 101 because we have 3 different types of tanks to play with. So separate structure is what we'd been using before, and that the tankage of the last couple rockets we've made has been basically this. So aluminum stringer, high pressure, and so forth tanks. Just kind of comparing performance. Let's go ahead. All right, so a little bit of testing these and these new tankages against each other. So with our separate structure tank, this is what we've been using before. An AJ-1027 with 60 seconds of burn time has 2,403 meters per second of delta V. So that's about the performance that we're used to. Couple differences with the new integral tank structure. So first of all, we're up 320 meters per second of delta V, so that's already fantastic. We have 95% utilization over the 92 of the separate structure model. And this is actually another like 60 kilograms lighter for more delta V. Well, that's actually probably the source of the more delta V, is because it's lighter. That's the key thing, is because there's less of the mass is the dry mass of the tank. So you'll see that the dry mass here is 34 kilograms compared to 90 kilograms. So we're dropping a whole bunch of weight there. And the third and final of these is the balloon tank, which is 2926, because once again we have another massive reduction in the dry weight of the tank. So now we're down to 6 kilograms dry weight because there's literally no structure here. It's just pressurized, and they're always pressurized. There's no unpressurized version. So anyways, yeah, that kind of shows you the difference. And once again, we're gonna go like, okay, so balloon tank, nearly 3,000 meters per second of delta V compared to the original separate structure of 2,400. So This is the tankage that is going to let us rebuild all of our rockets from scratch with the new tankage and the new balloon tanks. I'm not 100% sure why I wouldn't make every single tank a balloon tank. I'm sure the RP-1 veterans can tell me what I would be doing wrong if I were to be doing that. It's definitely not historically accurate, but for any tank that I would be making a high pressure tank, I don't know why I wouldn't make it a balloon tank, just because that's just, I get so much more fuel fraction and so little dry mass. So yeah, I think that now it's time for me to play with that tankage. And one thing that I wanted to do really quick before I move on, I don't mean to like show you guys every stage, every little step of the way, but one thing that somebody mentioned that they wanted a little more information on was how to build procedural avionics, which is something that I just kind of did, and I'm like, hey, this is procedural avionics and it works better, and then I just kind of moved on and I didn't really go into it at all. But so yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Let me make a booster really quick and we'll show you. Okay, so what we have here is a new balloon tank version of the of my redstone booster. So that's not historically accurate, but we're going to ignore that for now. The important point is we have a 26.2 ton booster stage here. And we need to get avionics to control it. So we go into our procedural avionics, which I made the root part for no particular reason. And we can start closing up some of these things that we don't need, like the textures and so forth. This is center of mass offset that I'm not going to play with, but that's more of a pro thing. But you can use this to change the center of mass of this particular part. You can accidentally cheat with that to make it so that the center of mass is outside of the part, but that's, it's not important for this particular application. So we're ignoring that one as well. Now we have the avionics. So we can close antenna planning, antennas, and science. All we need to worry about is avionics right now. So the way that this works, and what we're going to do for our booster here, is we can configure it, and the first thing we want to do is change it to the best possible avionics that you want. It looks like it automatically selects the best, and it has automatically selected the configuration of, you see near Earth here, and then there's also Science Core. Science Core is going to be your telemetry only, like your Aero B units and so forth. That is going to give you no control, but it is going to give you the ability to stage things, to adjust your throttle and to do science. So you need to have this for that, and this is how you change that. So you can just go to this one or this one, and so I'm sorry, it does not automatically select the best. So you're going to want to go into configuration and pick the best one you can. So avionics prototypes is what it is for me. If I wanted Science Core, Near Earth is going to be your booster stage one. I think the third type is like deep space procedural cores, but we don't have that yet, so we don't have to worry about it. Avionics prototypes, there we go. So there you go, and now it allows you to see a couple things. You see controlled mass is 0, so that means this can control 0 tons. So we're going to open up our avionics window as well to hold that open, and you see it supports 0 tons, but the vessel is 26.2 tons. And the avionics utilization is 54%. So what that represents is how much computer material is inside this ring. And so there's an amount of like miniaturization that you can do, basically. So the better avionics is going to be able to do more computing power in less space. But for these early ones, you're going to need to make them pretty big. So let's match the size of our booster stage here, which is 1.7. And there we go. And now you see we've gone down to 30% utilization. But this is a 26.2 ton rocket, so let's go ahead and, oh, look at that. We've maxed out at 6 tons. So we want to make the control mass, to make the control mass higher, we're going to need to make this a bigger, like literally bigger. We need more space for our avionics. So we can actually do a little bit of a trick here where we just make it 1 meter long. And there we go. Now all of a sudden we have all kinds of room. So let's make this 20. 7 tons. So that's the control mass that we want. You see this is 34% avionics utilization. It gives you your power requirements in wattage and the mass of your avionics, and also how much it's going to cost you. But 34% utilization gives you two things. It gives you a SM1 tank, so that's service module type tank, so really bad efficiency, but you could put like avionics, you could put like ComSat payloads and mission payloads and stuff in here. But we don't want to have a whole gigantic tank that we're not using. So what I like to do is I like to put in, well, you're not going to be able to put it in here. So what I like to do is to click on resize to utilization, boop, and then it shrinks it down to exactly what you need for the payload control mass that you've specified. So this has brought us down to 26.9 supported tonnage. The vessel is 26.4 tons. We see we've reduced the length to 340 millimeters, and there we go. Now we have a procedural control computer for this booster, and that is how I make these. What you can also do at this point is, okay, so I have 340 millimeters. I'm going to expand it to 350. And then you can open up the tank UI and put in electric charge. Boom, look at that. So 2,000 units of electric charge. And now you have a control unit that works just like the built-in ones, but is actually balanced perfectly for progression. This is what they balance against for what you're able to control and what you're able to use at any given time, not these built-in pre-made ones. So now, speaking of tooling, you're going to need to do that as well. So you'll see that it costs 3,370 funds to launch this procedural avionics untooled, but it actually costs less to tool it than it would to just launch it untooled. So you always need to tool your avionics. There's some extra factor in there that the developers have put in that makes it so that you just don't ever want to launch an untooled avionics. You can get away with it with rockets sometimes, but not with avionics. So yeah, tool that, and there you go. You have yourself an avionics ring that will get you where you need to be. And obviously, last bit of addendum, if you wanted just a science core, you could just resize that to utilization, and that is just itty bitty. I don't know what happens if, well, I think what happens if you have something that is that is underutilized or overutilized. I think you just have penalties to power usage or something. I'm not sure what the penalty is for having an overutilized science core, but yeah, just that resized utilization is your friend. So there you go. There's my tiny little tutorial on procedural avionics. All right, I have recreated the Explorer 2 with all the new tankage and the new parts. Wait, not really any new parts, just the new tankage. And also re-geared it up so that it theoretically should be able to do our first navigational satellite contract. And I wanted to just say a couple things about what I've managed to do here. First of all, I figured out Textures Unlimited Recolor, and the fact that I could like take the patterns that are in here and apply paint to them. Like if you open the recoloring UI, you can paint stuff. So just like I figured out with the planes, I figured out you can apply that to the patterns here, and so you get a redstone booster that looks a little bit more like a redstone booster. I also answered a couple of my own questions that I had just a moment ago about balloon tanks versus integral structure tanks. First of all, balloon tanks, even though they're pressurized, they're not high pressure. At least as far as the Aerobee Zasser 1 is concerned. So I made this a balloon tank here, and it didn't work with this Aerobee, so I had to make it an integral structure tank. So that's fine. I also made the main booster tank a balloon to get a little bit of extra delta V, and the reason why you wouldn't always use balloon tanks is because they are dramatically more expensive to tool. So you can see the cost that it's going to be to just tool this booster stage because it's a new diameter, new type of tank, blah blah blah. So there's some savings that isn't happening there, but it's 28,000 to tool this tank, which is not cheap. And we can do a little bit of a comparison of a 1 meter by 1 meter integrated tank versus a 1 meter by 1 meter balloon tank. So you can see that there's the balloon tank costs almost double, not quite almost double, like 40% more than the integral tank to tool. But once they're tooled, it looks like they're about the same price. I wonder if, like, okay. Once you start to get to larger sizes, you see the difference starts to pull away from each other. The balloon tanks are always going to be more expensive, and that's the difference between the structure tanks and balloon tanks. I think it even says that in the definition of the balloon tank. Expensive and complex, but much lighter. So yeah, that's the trade-off, is that they are a lot more expensive to tool, a lot more expensive to build, but they will shave off weight, which, as we've mentioned, is the key to playing RP-1. So yeah, this, I think, a little bit less of a narwhal. We don't have a double B stack on top. Just the improvements in tankage has allowed me to bring it down to just the redstone and then just this arrow bee. I think this has a bit of a fatal flaw in that it's not going to, I'm not sure if this is going to be able to coast. I'm going to have to test this to make sure, but I've got the numbers right, which is, you know, step 1. But yeah, if this works out, this is going to be our workhorse for the next couple of contracts as we wait for orbital rocketry in just 200 more days. Alright, and now just beginning my recording, because I definitely didn't just spend a whole lot of time talking while this plane was flying and didn't have the record button pressed. That definitely is not something that I would have done. Anyways, so this was a flight of my X2 Psyplane that was accomplishing the Supersonic contract. So what we did was we got to 651 meters per second, basically, and held it between 12,300 meters and 14,300 meters for 3 minutes, which I've mentioned before. I don't have 3 minutes of thrust on, or 3 minutes of burn time on this plane, but what I do have is the ability to throttle down with the XLR-11s. So yeah, I use the middle tier of the XLR-11, so not the big super thrust X15 version, but the one before that, the RM5, I think. And that allowed me to throttle down enough such that I was able to just get 3 minutes of burn time at the correct altitude and velocity before it cut out. And this also reflects the mature supersonic flight technology node that we just unlocked as well, which meant that we dropped right about at this altitude, 13,750 meters at 270 meters per second, which, you know, worked out great. We were able to, oh no, did I just waste I guess I just wasted an ignition. I guess it's not going to matter because this is going to drop in the water anyways. But yeah, so that worked out great. That flight was fantastic. We did what we needed to do. We got this, and we have another space plane building because Simov on the RP-1 Discord has put together a new version of this plane that he says flies a little bit better, and I'm really excited to try it out. So we've got one of those building because I have stolen it unabashedly. So anyways, this is going to continue gliding for a while. But I'm pretty sure we're not going to make it all the way back to the Cape. I think I was a little overambitious in how far out I put this when I airdropped it. So this is probably going to go in the water, which is fine because we've got a brand new version of this plane coming up. So that'll be a fitting send-off. So we just got to hope that Sally Bradley makes it down into the water safely. We've got the parachute, and we've tested this a bunch, so I'm not that worried about it. Alright, nice safe landing minus the engines, which we expected, but Sally Bradley's coming home safe, and that's what matters. And we're going to do a normal recovery because we are done with this plane. Thank you for your service. And that got us another 25,000 plus the 20-ish thousand advance. So yeah, that's why I wanted to kind of get in there and do that one, because it, yeah, this supersonic contract, it starts at a pretty low amount. See, 39% of its nominal value for the next variant of this one, because 47 days have elapsed out of the expected 90, I guess. I don't know what measures that. Like, is it since I accepted the last one? I guess it must be. But that means that the reward is down to a very small 2,000 and 2,500. So we're not going to do that one for a while. So we can go back to doing these pure altitude contracts for a while. All right, but we've got plenty of funds, and with that one, I'm actually going to buy a couple points, and I'd like to increase our VAB and our R&D both. Yeah, because I need to get things moving. We are actually getting 1956 to 1957 orbital rocketry before the end of 1957, so I'm going to call that good, but that does mean that we are slightly behind in our research, question mark? I think that's what that means. I'm more interested in matching historical milestones, but I kind of accept that at this point I'm going to start falling behind because I'm just kind of doing things off the top of my own head rather than following some kind of optimal progression path. The game really opens up at this point and becomes a lot more fun for me, so that means that we'll be, messing around a bit more. And the year doesn't actually matter to anyone. It's only just an interesting yardstick to measure yourself against, and it's hard not to when there's a big date sitting right there. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are here at Launch Complex 60, ready to launch my newly redesigned Explorer 3 rocket with all of the new tankage and so forth that entails, which should make this a much more capable rocket with the balloon tank that increases the delta V. But without further ado, 3, 2, 1. Launch failure. Well, okay, that was always a possibility. This is not a very well-tested rocket, so I guess we'll be rolling it back. Okie dokie, let's try this one more time, shall we? 3, 2, 1, engine start. I thought I said engine start. Engine activate. Oh my goodness. All right, that is our second failure in a row. My test light luck seems to have run out at this point. All right, third attempt. Throttle up, stage, and activate. Hey, we have thrust. All right, 3, 2, 1, release. There we go. All right, so this is the redesign of our Explorer 2 concept rocket. We are going to rotate around here because this is the Navstar 1 payload that I've put together. A little bit less than 45 degrees is what we're looking for because we need to get to an inclination of 45 degrees with this contract. So that's what we're looking for, inclination of 45 degrees and periapsis of 300 kilometers. Which we are able to do handily with our new slimmed down version of our Explorer rocket. This is the same redstone booster that we've been using before, and only the Zasser 1 Aerobee stage up on top. I've been able to, with the new tankage that we've unlocked in satellite era materials science, we are able to get just as much delta V out of just these 2 stages as we did out of the 3-stage variant that we used to get orbital the first time, which is just crazy and just shows you how powerful these upgrades to material science are. So yeah, that's kind of what we're working on here, is working on throwing down range a couple of these payloads for early satellites. This should just barely get into this orbit as far as I've tested, and I'm hopeful that there's no issues with that because we've had this A-series engine fail on us a bunch of times in a row, which is never fun. But I've tried to do a bunch of redesigns of this to make this more capable, get more ability to get bigger payloads into orbit, but I've found I'm constrained by my technology level. I'm not a wizard like some of the folks out there are that can kind of jury-rig orbital rockets on Node 1. I'm waiting for some of the better rockets. And before I really stress myself out spending a whole bunch of money tooling for this configuration, I'm going to wait until I get 1956, 1957 orbital rocketry, get all those shiny new engines, and then with that we are going to really start building our new orbital rocket class. So we are just about to 300 kilometers. There we go. We've hit that. So now I'm just kind of tipping that down, and there we go. Just perfectly at an apoapsis of 346 kilometers. So let's go ahead and stage that off and turn on our RCS to make sure that we are nicely controlled. You notice we're also in a 46-degree inclination, and that is a little bit more than the 45 degrees that this contract calls for, because as I said, we are putting a navigational satellite into orbit. It's not going to last terribly long, but that, they don't stipulate that. All right, in all of my testing, I've found that I've needed to burn a little bit ahead of the 50% mark on the maneuver node. Well, maneuver node, but to before my apoapsis, I want to burn half in front and half behind normally, but I actually have found that I needed to kind of front load, so we're going to try to launch this at about 50 seconds before we hit apoapsis to get the best use of our orbital height. And we are doing our spin here. All right, we are spun up, and I am trying to get this ullage ready to go. All right, so we are all ready. And off we go. Fabulous. Yeah, so with just the Zasser 1 here, this means that there's a lot less margin, well, there's more margin for error, I guess, or less margin for error. It's only one engine that I have to fire as opposed to two, which gives you the benefit of not having to do two ignitions in the air. So hopefully this will get us this will get us into the correct orbit. That would be lovely if it did. So I found that I'm spin stabilizing, but I'm not 100% sure if this is even something that's actually necessary. I do it every time and it feels nice, but I'm still not 100% sure that this is something that you need to do to make your rockets not go flopping around. I haven't tested it without. Oh my goodness. Ah, perfect. Okay, cool. Yeah, so like I said, I'm not sure if that's a entirely necessary thing to spin this. I'm not sure, would it have gone off target? Maybe I should test that one of these times to see if I'm doing this pointlessly. It seems kind of nice. It seems kind of neat to spin this up, but it may not be necessary. I feel like I might be just going off of information I've heard. But anyways, yeah, we are getting into our stable orbit. We are checking that now. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Boom! First navigational satellite complete. The Navstar 1 has done it. Or Navstar A, I'm sorry. The Navstar A is in orbit and is providing us with no science whatsoever. It is just a payload satellite for this contract and is getting us a bunch of money and also tests of our various booster components before we move on. All right, and so first navigational satellite complete. The satellite is in orbit, and we have already begun to receive Doppler curves. So yeah, this is based on the transit satellites, which was one of the early, some of the early satellites that were launched by the United States to help provide precise positioning. And the way that they did that was by detecting changes in Doppler frequency shift. So you know how when a car drives past you and the pitch changes depending on where it is relative to you? Well, the same thing happens with radio frequencies from space. So they were able to measure that shift, and that is a big part of how navigation satellites work, or at least that's how they worked for the early transit satellites that this is mocking up. So yeah, very cool that we've got that complete, knocked one more out. All right, so with those extra funds, let's drop a couple more points into the VAB and R&D because we need to be constantly improving. It is important for us to keep driving forward our technology even as we get up to some unlocks. And I think I'm going to be able to get away with about maybe 150,000 funds worth of unlock fees, but we'll see what happens in a moment. All right, we've done it. In August 10th of 1957, we have unlocked 1956-1957 orbital rocketry. Whew, goodness gracious. Okay, so We have satellite era materials science, which gives us integrated tanks and balloon tanks, which are really mass efficient and really, they are basically the orbital capable structures that were actually used to make orbital class launch vehicles. We're not getting everything here. This would cost us 722,000 funds, and I don't think we're ever going to need that. I've decided to go down kind of a US rocket path because I know a lot more about that than I do about Soviet rockets. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy one of these lovely boosters, and we are going to buy this AJ-10 series early upper stage. The first version that you unlock of this, the AJ-1037, is actually pretty unreliable since it's based on the Vanguard 2, but since I'm going the US path, this seems to be the way to go, alongside some potential solid rocket boosters. I'm not super skilled with using solid rockets as upper stages, but I'm definitely going to give it a try. We are researched all the way up to 1958 as far as, well, we are in progress of researching the 1958 solid rocket engines. So I'm going to be using those because I find them to be a pretty easy thing to swap in for liquid-fueled stages. So we're going to get this AJ-10 series early because that's 100% necessary. Now let's take a look at the booster that we need. All right, so the engines that we're looking at here are a bunch of LR series rockets, a bunch of engines in that family. So the LR-105 is the sustainer engine for the Atlas rocket, and that is a lovely thing that I would love to use, but you generally need to use that with a couple extra side boosters. So the Atlas configuration had that stage and a half kind of like drop booster thing where they dropped a couple of these LR-89 engines. So this is the main engine in the middle, and then they had two of these strapped to the side that they dropped off. And that would be lovely, but that also looks incredibly expensive. So we are instead going to go for the LR-79, which is basically the same rocket as the LR-89 at this tech level, but this is used in a lot of single engine rockets such as the Jupiter, the Thor Delta. So we're going to be able to recreate some historical rockets with this and the AJ-10 here, without having to get any more than just these two unlocks. So yeah, we are going to go ahead and pick this one up. Fabulous, fabulous. And there we go. Now we have the new engines that we're going to use. There's also some upgrades that we could use down here. Like I could go to the A7 of the Redstone rocket, which was used on the Jupiter C and the Juno 1 vehicles. So this would be kind of like the precursor to moving up to this one, but I did just buy this one, so I guess I could just go straight to that. And it looks like there's also a very sneaky XLR11 upgrade in here, which I'm not sure if that's just another boost increase, but yeah, we'll play around with that. So yeah, this gives us a ton more to do as far as making new rockets, so let's get to it. All right, so the first thing I wanted to look at is what the A7 looks like in the A-series rockets. So that, it looks like, gets us a small increase in thrust, which is always great. But, ooh, man, look at that increase in ISP. Oh, my goodness. So that gets us an increase of 19 seconds at surface level for this rocket. So just look at what this is going to do. This is actually going to be a pretty significant upgrade, I think. So we are at 9,663 on the Navstar A rocket that I just launched. I picked this up. We are going to have to throw out the tanks and then redo it because it's using a different fuel type. That's an interesting thing to think about, is that most of these engine upgrades represent fuel type changes. We put that together and there we go. Just like that, we've increased our delta V by 600 meters per second. 400 or 500 meters per second, and that doesn't take into account what the rated burn time is. So the rated burn time on this one is 2 minutes and 35 seconds, so we can actually go a little bit longer. Yeah, so there we go. So yeah, that gets us another like 600 meters per second just on this. And the surface level thrust is a little bit better, actually, than it was before, which means we will experience less gravity losses to our delta V because we are able to fly up and over much faster than we did before. So yeah, and that was cheap too, which is really cool. So we can actually make a bunch of these going forward and have them be, but they're relatively reliable. Like 9% is really not great at all. That's pretty darn bad, but that's only at 2,000 data units. So, all right, and just to show you the brand new awesome capabilities of these engines and the fairly dramatic difference that they make, this is kind of how I prototype these rockets, just because I want to get just a rough sense of how much thrust and how much delta V I'm going to get out of them, because you can put something together like this and then you can kind of build down from scrape things down from there, and then you can work on making it pretty once you have all the payload in place. But with no payload whatsoever, we are up to 12,629 meters per second, which is bonkers. That is a lot higher than the Naked Explorer 3 that I had with the other parts in the Aero B and that sort of thing. This upper stage alone is 5,000 meters per second, which just goes to show you the power and why this is such a critical and necessary component of the space program and our space program going forward. So yeah, this is kind of like the Thor Delta, sort of. We'll talk more about that when I launch it, but the Thor Delta used the LR-79 as the main booster stage, and then it had an AJ-10 engine on top, but then it had a solid kick motor on the top, which we do not have access to, but we could, I don't know, let's see what that would look like. You can tell I don't have really good atmospheric or non-atmospheric solid rocket motors, because this is definitely not what this one is designed to do. But yeah, that actually decreases our total delta V. So anyways, this is what I'm going to be using as kind of the baseline of our new booster rocket going forward. So yeah, we got some work to do, but let's play with this and see what we come up with. Alright, so we have just launched the X3 Cyplane, and we are now moving on up and heading upwards, literally upwards. Yeah, so what this one is here to do, just like the other ones, we are just hitting 65 kilometers. So I've shown you this a million times, but I did want to show you how lovely the work that Simov has done on improving this plane. I'm not sure 100% all of what he's done behind the scenes to make this a more maneuverable plane, but I definitely can agree that it is. And it also looks a lot cooler too. It's got like these little black detailing and stuff. It's using the new tankage, separate structure tanks instead of just procedural tank 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing. So yeah, so that's pretty darn cool, and I like it, and it hopefully will work really well and not blow up. If it does blow up, that's probably entirely my fault. But the standard fly-by-wire control with autopilot, atmospheric autopilot, is just fantastic, as I've mentioned before. So yeah, not much more to say about this one unless something blows up. Future me here, wondering why I cannot keep my mouth shut. So as you can see, I have made an attempt at kind of swinging around for a very low and close landing. I actually was trying to I was actually trying to land on my wheels because I had such a good approach. Everything was going so well. But then I had to abort because I was getting nervous, and I pulled the parachute at 150 meters, which don't do that. Justin, don't. Yeah, that's what happens. You blow off the engine every time when you pull the parachute that low, and you'd think that I would learn, but I don't. So anyways, that's fine. It's gonna cost us a bunch of time and money to get this engine put back on. And one of these days my hubris will be beaten down enough to not make the same mistake over and over again. So I guess I really apologize for that, because that's not great that I just keep doing the same thing. Like, whenever a flight goes well, I start feeling like, oh yes, I've got this. I understand now. I've gotten good, and I can do this, and I can make it work. And then I blow off an engine because I stop being patient and careful. So, lesson to be learned: be patient, be careful, and you'll have a much better career. But I think that is going to have to do it for us today. I'm still dialing in the length of these episodes. I had some people say that they wanted to see them longer, which like blew my mind a little bit because I figured that people would have lost interest after like 20 minutes of hearing me just yammering on as I'm playing kind of in real time. But yeah, let me know what you think. If you'd like longer, that's great. I can go a little bit longer. If you'd like them to go back to half an hour, that also would work. Just go ahead and throw some comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff, and I will see you next time.